is the United States and a coalition of Western allies on the brink tonight of military action against Syria. Now, a day after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned that the Obama administration would hold the Syrian government accountable for, quote, the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians, the drumbeat towards possible intervention appears to be growing louder. Now, U.S. media has reported that a strike could come as early as this Thursday, and that administration officials are in the process right now of declassifying documents to justify that intervention. And we've just heard in the past few minutes that those documents could be released in the next couple of days as well for an action without a UN mandate. Now, the White House insists Barack Obama's yet to make a final decision, but his actions, including a flurry of telephone diplomacy with Australia's Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and the French president here in Paris, François Hollande, suggest he's hard at work trying to forge a coordinated approach. Now, his Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, says the U.S. is, quote, ready to go with all military options when and if the order comes down from the U.S. president. In the U.K., meanwhile, Prime Minister David Cameron, who earlier cut short his summer holiday, recalled Parliament from its recess to debate the UK's response to the Syria crisis, a vote set for this Thursday. Tonight we're asking how a strike would be legally justified if it happens. Without the UN fully on board, is it even legal under international law? What would be the aims of a military action? What would be the risks? My guests joining me here tonight in the studio. I will start with Laurie Dundon. Welcome. You are a former State Department official, very active during the Kosovo period with the Truman National Security Project, yes, and a regular face here on our set.
Thank you.
And to your right, Laurie, Ambassador Wilfried Bolewski, you're ambassador, a professor of international law. You'll be very helpful on that issue, and diplomacy at the American Graduate School here in Paris. And to my left as well, Patricia Lalonde. Thanks for being here. You're a researcher at the Institute, the Perspective Institute, Institute for Prospects and Security here in Europe. And we will be talking to you about for or against intervention a little bit. And joining me via satellite from London tonight, Philip Stoner, a former deputy UK defense attaché who's based here in Paris, but joining us tonight from London. Thanks for being here as well. I'm going to get to all of you very shortly, I promise. But first, I do want to get the very latest from Washington tonight, since so much seems to be happening right now on the U.S. front, with our correspondent there, Philip Crowther. Good evening, Philip. I want to ask you right away. I said the drumbeat of war appears to be getting louder tonight. U.S. media reporting a strike could come as soon as this Thursday. What are we doing? Laying the groundwork here for public opinion in the U.S.?
Yes, absolutely. It is the Obama administration that is largely responsible for this drumbeat of war because all arms of the government are preparing public opinion, preparing their partners as well, preparing pretty much everybody for what is to come very, very soon indeed, as early as this week. That is the latest we have from the White House. Just came from the White House briefing. They say that they are absolutely certain that chemical weapons were used, but they're not yet entirely 100% there in terms of saying that it was indeed the Assad regime who used those chemical weapons. Still, though, there is a method to this, to what the White House is doing right now, with that information being given to senior administration officials who are leaking certain bits of information. The White House has its official line as well. And we have heard from Secretary of State John Kerry, the next step up, that is President Barack Obama. We could hear from him as early as this week. The method we're seeing here is maybe similar to what we saw before military intervention in Libya. The big difference, though, being, of course, that the United Nations Security Council is not part of this. Diplomatically, what President Barack Obama is doing now, he's contacting his counterparts. The latest is Canadian Prime Minister Harper and Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel. Well, he's been in touch with his French and British counterparts. You mentioned public opinion. Absolutely, it has to be prepared because public opinion in the United States currently is against military intervention. That is why that is so crucial. Just quickly, what you can announce, what you can expect in the next few days to come, any announcement that will come from the president. He is the highest up. He's the last one still to speak on this, and he will also reveal the proof that the White House believes it has of the use of chemical weapons at that precise time. And the one thing that is still missing, of course, in that equation is when that type of military intervention and exactly what type might happen.
So, Philip, things moving fast and furiously there in Washington. We're obviously all on standby waiting to hear what comes next. I want to cut right now to here in Paris, where Catherine Norris-Trent, our correspondent here, has been attending François Hollande speaking earlier, just a short while ago, to all of his ambassadors gathered at the French presidential palace. Good evening, Catherine. We know already François Hollande has taken a tough line on Syria. He had very tough words this evening as well, did he not?
He did indeed. There was a ramping up of the rhetoric from French President François Hollande. He opened his speech on French diplomacy for the year to come to France's ambassadors by talking about Syria. And he said now that everything led France to believe that the authors of the attack in Damascus, which he qualified as a chemical massacre, was perpetrated by the Syrian regime. And he said the world could not stand by and allow that to happen. He said, though, that France would now be working on generating what he called an appropriate response to what's been happening in Syria. We know he's going to hold a meeting of his Defence Council tomorrow, Wednesday, in Paris. So the talk's still continuing. He was strong on words, but short on concrete measures. Interestingly, though, and right on topic for you tonight, Douglas, he did talk about international law. He didn't directly link this to the Syrian question. He came to it just afterwards, but he said France was committed to international law, but that could evolve and must evolve with the times. He said that he was committed personally to this responsibility to protect civilians, and that international law must not be used as a shroud for countries to hide behind while they commit international massacres. So again, he didn't link that to the Syrian question, but what people are reading into it here is that France now, François Hollande, talking about a way perhaps to bypass the UN Security Council, which is looking, of course, very blocked.
And Catherine, that is where, very conveniently, we are going to begin our debate here tonight. Thank you very much there from the presidential palace, French presidential palace here in Paris. And I want to go right to the chase, and I want to go to you, Ambassador Belevsky. I want to ask you what we just heard about international law. We talk about bypassing the UN. This is a large issue. Is an intervention legal under the norms we know internationally? If so, how? How do you justify it?
Thank you. Talking about the commitment to international law, we have to look at it in a twofold way. One is the UN Charter, Security Council, blocked. There is international law outside and above the UN Security Council, called international customary law. Part of the emerging international customary law is the responsibility to protect. UN Security General Assembly resolution on 2005 and the UN Security Council resolution on Libya. Looking at this text of Libya, it gives us a clear definition of R2P, responsibility to protect. And the definition is to take all necessary measures to protect civilians and civil populated areas under threat of attack while excluding foreign occupation force in any form.
But I want to cut in here. I just want to, and right to protect specifically here, Laurie Dunton, from chemical weapons, presumably, or a general right to protect. 100,000 have died in this conflict already. Is it the chem weapons we're talking about?
Certainly, I think the chemical weapons issue is a threshold issue it's been noted as a threshold issue for President Obama, for President Hollande, and many others. I don't think that precludes them from making the R2P argument, which, as you said, has been an evolving trend in international law. But there is a long-standing tradition in customary law of the commitments not to use poison gas. And Syria, although it is not did not sign up to the Chemical Weapons Convention, it is a member of, the 1925 Geneva Protocol, which laid the groundwork for that. And so there is a clear violation under customary law in that regard, and that's important in the U.S. calculation. So breaching
international treaties pertaining to chemical weapons. Patricia Lalonde, I just want to ask you here, we're hearing in the last few minutes that the White House, Barack Obama himself, saying that it's practically beyond any doubt that this chemical weapons attack, which has been established to be chemical weapons were used, was perpetrated, in fact, by Bashar Assad. Yet you were telling me earlier before the show that you're still not for an intervention at this point right away.
Yes, of course, because we are not quite sure. We are waiting for the declassified documents who are going to arrive within few days. But at this time, we have no proof at all that Bashar
Okay.
al-Assad is behind.
I just want to
the
correct
attack.
myself for the record. It wasn't Barack Obama saying that it was Assad. It was a White House spokesperson
Yeah.
saying there's no doubt that chemical weapons agents were used in this attack.
Yes.
So in other words, you feel that we still need to wait for the results of that UN inspection team on the ground to come through, and then perhaps we should move on to this step.
Yes, absolutely, because the UN inspectors are on the ground right now, even if they can't go everywhere because of a problem of security. But we have to wait about the research and what they find really. But I cannot imagine we are going to war after tomorrow without having all these proofs.
I want to bring Philip Stonner into this debate, former Deputy UK Defence Attaché. You've been waiting patiently there in London. Sir, do you think there's a little bit too much precipitation here tonight, everyone rushing to an intervention without the full proof, especially, David Cameron, I was saying earlier, has already recalled Parliament, and we could have a vote by Thursday?
I think that is certainly one way of looking at it. But I think what you have to bear in mind, you have to sort of roll this back a couple of years. This has been going on for some long time now. And there's been this build-up of pressure over the last couple of years, the problem with Syria. And it's something, as far as the international community is concerned, the key players, the US, Russia, France, and possibly the UK, have been concerned about for a long time. And now there is clearly a tipping point where the US, France, and most likely the UK sees that this has gone beyond the pale. Something has happened, and they have to actually step up to the plate and do something about it. Public opinion here, certainly in the UK, is moving not necessarily towards screaming, but towards demanding very vociferously for some sort of action, somebody to be held accountable for what happened last week. And I think that's what we hear when we listen to François Hollande, to David Cameron, and clearly to Mr. Kerry yesterday when he was making his emotional plea to the world at his press conference.
Right, and actually, I think John Kerry did say yesterday he called it a moral obscenity. He didn't mince his words. He basically accused Bashar Assad directly of covering up responsibility for what he called a cowardly crime. What's interesting here is the U.S. Defense Secretary, Chuck Hagel, has been basically saying he wants to do this with full legality. It needs absolute international backing. I would actually like our viewers to take a listen to what he said regarding any intervention.
The United States is looking at all options regarding the situation in Syria. We're working with our allies and with the international community. We are analyzing the intelligence, and we will get the facts. And if there is any action taken, it will be in concert with the international community and within the framework of legal justification.
Laurie, I want to ask you, we've seen action taken before where Russia has ended up giving its backing. Now, in the Libya precedent, Russia said, look what happens there. Mm-hmm. We had military intervention, which was couched in terms of the right protecting civilian population, and Russia says, look what it turned into. It turned into regime change. Do you see, they're saying the same things again, a limited campaign. Do you see the danger from a U.S. perspective? This will not be short, this will not be limited.
Well, I don't think the U.S. is making their calculation based on how the Russians are analyzing the situation. That back and forth is long-standing over Libya, Kosovo, many other conflicts in the past as well as this one. All sides recognize that it is an extremely complex situation, which has been part of the hesitation to get involved up to this point. So all of that is already part of the debate that the U.S. has been deliberating over the last months as we've seen these small-scale but gradually rolling tragedy continue one after another. Now they're sitting down, and I think Kerry's words yesterday were laying the groundwork for the message that's going to come out, saying this goes beyond just Syria. And so that's where the argument saying this violation of chemical weapons, what we saw, this is beyond even our debate of whether or not we should get involved surely solely on the issue of Syria. And so this is how now I think they'll frame their argument. also in terms of a limited intervention, not going in full scale, taking on the civil war as our own, not going in Iraq style, not going in a big campaign, but focused on a very narrow
limited,
objective.
A limited strike. Now, we will remember, I'm sure just about everyone here on the set, and Philip Stunner in London as well. Back in 2003, when we were talking about Iraq, France was very much opposed. France refused to go along with the coalition. And I just want our viewers, just to refresh everyone's memory, listen to the then Foreign Minister, Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin.
Such an intervention could have untold consequences on the stability of this fragile and scarred region. It would reinforce the feeling of injustice, worsen tensions, and could lead to other conflicts.
Now, let us fast forward 10 years, and we spoke to our correspondent Catherine Norris-Trent earlier, who had listened to François Hollande. Let's listen to what François Hollande had to say.
The chemical massacre in Damascus must not go unanswered. And France is ready to punish those who made the vile decision to gas these innocents.
You don't get any more direct and blunt than that, Patricia Lalonde. France is ready to punish those who gassed innocent civilians.
Of course, we are right to punish people who have taken these chemical weapons, of course, because it is a terrible slaughter. So many people died, and it is not possible to let this unpunished. But the question is who, and I think that nobody is asking this question, who is behind? We are not sure who is behind. And I can tell you that the Al-Qaeda's people linked to the Islamist people, jihadists linked to Al-Qaeda, has infiltrated, the rebels, the ASL. And so, in my sense, there is a suspicion.
Suspicion, right.
A great suspicion that Al-Nusra will also be behind this chemical. So it's really. I am not trying to. How do you say? I am trying to help Bashar al-Assad regime and these people.
You're
but
just saying
I
prudence.
think that we are not. We are not sufficiently. We are not sufficiently trying to know who is Al-Nusra and all these people of Al-Qaeda who are making manipulation from everywhere. And so another thing I want to tell you that 1 month ago, I heard that in Iraq we found chemical weapons in camps of Al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. And so we know that Al-Nusra was looking for chemical weapons. So we cannot put this simply on the right and say it's Bashar al-Assad because we decided one day that Bashar al-Assad, of course, is not a good guy, of course, he's not a Democrat.
But you can't go in right away. I take your point. I just want to quickly share with our viewers, one second, a tweet that has come in from Al-Darkawiya saying, we could bring it up there, I understand those who say that Western intervention in Syria will unsettle the region even more, but really, what other solution is there? So a real sentiment out there, and in these tweets that it's perhaps the best of many bad options out there. But we're going to have to actually leave it there, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the military aspects and the risks that we're possibly facing if there is military action taken. We will be back after this short break. We're talking about Syria tonight, and are we on a slow march to a military action against the regime of Bashar Assad?